Criminal intent. The murder of Nikki Semret. Who killed Nikki Semret? My name is Ross McLean, and the purpose of this video is to shed some light on the evidence, to help discover the motive and catch the killer of 55-year-old Nikki Semret. In the early morning hours of Tuesday, October 23, 2012, Nikki Semret, age 55, was walking home from her work on the midnight shift from the Delta Chelsea Hotel in Toronto, where she worked as a midnight cleaning supervisor. It was 7 a.m. when she was stalked and stabbed viciously to death by a suspect in the walkway between Ontario Street and Bleecker Street in downtown Toronto. What was the motive? What reason would a killer have to attack a woman so savagely? Somebody knows, and somebody or several people know who this killer is. If after watching this video you have any knowledge about this crime, you must help to put this killer behind bars. Toronto police have assigned Detective Sergeant Gary Giroux, one of their top investigators, to crack this case, to catch the killer of Nikki Semret. He's got over 13 other detectives working with him, and they intend to solve this crime. One of the most puzzling aspects for everyone in this crime is the motive. Just what was the motive for killing Nikki? One possible motive for Nikki's death and murder is tied back to her home country of Eritrea. Eritrea is a small country in Africa, and it's listed as one of the poorest and most despotic countries in the world, run by a dictator and a military with some of the worst prisons in the world. In fact, the United Nations and Human Rights Watch have both investigated the country and found many violations. The military basically run the country. All the women even have to serve time in the military when they're there. The country's been at war and has had such problems for so long that many of the citizens have been fleeing the country for the past 20 years. The president of the country has put out a diaspora tax on all Eritreans who've left the country, where they must repay 2% of all of their wages that they make every month to the consulates of the country that they're at. Now, the UN has found this to be an oppressive tax. Even Canada's foreign minister, John Baird, has spoken out against it, as have other countries. And as recently as September, John Baird has threatened to close the Eritrean consulate and throw them out of the country and no longer allow them to operate in Canada. Part of the reason is that government that collects the money is tied to a terrorist organization that works out of Somalia. Now, apparently this 2% tax is some of the largest funding that this dictator has to run the country and the military. And one of the largest areas that contributes to it is the Toronto consulate, from all the money it collects from the Eritreans in the Toronto area. Now, the consulate has said that they will stop collecting this 2% tax, and the government, the Canadian government, has allowed them to stay on. However, the word on the street is that they are still collecting that 2% tax. So is it possible that Nikki stopped paying that tax, or didn't have the money to pay, or owed, or is encouraging other Eritreans not to pay the tax? We don't know. This is all speculation. But it sure is strange timing that the tax was supposedly stopped, and just shortly after an Eritrean is murdered. A second possible theory for the murder of Nikki Semret was at her workplace. Now, there could have been a number of things that happened there. First off, Nikki was a cleaning supervisor, so she was in charge of people. Did she have a beef with someone at her place of employment? Did she bother someone enough that they'd get mad enough and angry enough to want to kill her? But also, hotels in general, not this one specifically, but in general, can be hotbeds for crime. You have drugs, prostitution, thefts, credit cards that get stolen. There's all sorts of issues. So is it possible Nikki either got in the way of someone and their criminal enterprise there, Or could she have somehow been involved herself? Now, there's no hint of this. The police are looking into it, but it's certainly a theory that needs to be examined. A possible third theory or motive for her murder could be that while Nikki was walking home every morning through this tough neighborhood, through Allen Gardens to get home, she could have come across some street thug or street criminal in the past and had a bit of a run-in, and this could have been someone exacting revenge on her, or possibly just a random attack, although my instincts don't tell me that it's random. Police, however, are looking at suspects, past suspects, and criminals who've committed similar acts of violence in the past. In particular, they're looking for this one suspect pictured here, who is wanted for 4 violent robberies against elderly women right down the street from where Nikki was murdered. And these robberies took place only 4 weeks before her murder. These 3 theories seem to offer the greatest probability for the motivation or the motive for this killer to have attacked Nikki. There may be others, but these would seem to be the top motives in my mind. Next, we'll look at what Nikki was wearing that morning, that fateful morning when she was stabbed. She had on a raincoat, sort of a putty-colored white rain jacket. She was carrying with her a white umbrella that she used to shield herself from the rain, dark black pants, and a bag with a fairly distinctive logo on the side of it. Police will be looking at that in all of the video that they've collected to help identify the route that she took on her way home. Now let's look at the murder weapon that was used. It was a knife described by the witness as being large with a long blade, silver with a serrated edge. It's been described by the police as being like a roast beef knife. Here's a selection of knives that could match that description. The one I've circled in red is one that is probably closest to what we're looking for. The police haven't recovered yet the knife and are still looking for it and asking people to continue to look in the area for it. Now let's look at Nikki's route home. Police feel pretty confident that her normal route home after leaving work in the morning at the Delta Chelsea was to walk across Gerrard Street to Yonge Street, north on Yonge to Carlton, and across Carlton to perhaps either Bleecker Street, where she may have gone up to cut through that shortcut as well to get home. However, police also know that she took a different route this rainy morning. Now, the Toronto Police, Detective Sergeant Gary Giroux, have gone out with their team, and they've gone out and seized hundreds of hours of videotape from cameras that belong to private residences and businesses along the possible routes that Nikki could have taken. The police also have their own CCTV that they can look at, for instance, from these cameras here that are at Yonge and Gerrard. So using all of these cameras and their investigations, police have been able to determine that when Nikki left work that morning, she went out onto Gerrard Street, walked across Gerrard, and continued walking east on Gerrard as far as Mutual Street. They have that much confirmed. Toronto police, at least to this point, have not confirmed that they know for sure what Nikki's exact path was past Mutual Street. However, this map here shows what was a possible route for her to continue off across Gerrard Street and up and cross through Allen Gardens as indicated by the red line, then up to Bleecker Street, and then through that faithful shortcut that runs between Bleecker Street and Ontario Street. Now in this picture, on the left, you can see where she would have emerged from Allen Gardens had she taken that shortcut. On the far right is Carlton Street, where she may have come walking up the sidewalk on that side, if that was the route that she chose to take that morning. Next we see the 2 possible routes that Nikki could have taken. She could have turned to her left off of Carlton Street and gone north on Sherbourne Street to a shortcut to the parking lot, or she could have continued going east along Carlton Street over to Bleecker Street. We're not sure exactly which route she took. Now let's take a look at the final stage of Nikki's journey on that morning, where she approached the scene where the crime actually took place. Now we have lots of video and lots of information on this part that have been released by the police. Here's the scene as Nikki would have walked towards that final shortcut path that she took. Here you see an overhead shot of the route that was taken between Bleecker Street and Ontario Street, marked in red. In this next picture, you see where the X is on the left-hand side. That's where the video shows that the attacker was standing and came after to stalk Nikki. Careful examination of the police video shows that this is the location that the stalker was standing before he went after Nikki. Now it's also possible that Nikki came through that way herself and the stalker was somewhere behind her, cutting through the parking lot from Sherbourne Street. Now we see the view that Nikki would have seen as she walked towards the shortcut of the building. And as we get closer, you can see the part where the CCTV camera caught the first images of Nikki in the video that was first released by the police and the video that first showed the killer. Now here are some frame grabs from the police video that was initially released that showed Nikki walking through that alleyway that we had just highlighted. You can see Nikki coming through with her umbrella, and then a short time after, the killer comes walking through. We'll blow up some of those images later so you can have a better look at them. Those other videos can be seen on my website at rossmcleansecurity.com or on the Toronto Police's video website. Now we come to the midpoint of the shortcut. What's significant here is you can see that Nikki, as she goes walking through, stays to the left and is walking straight ahead. But the dome camera that the police second video captured shows that the killer made an attempt to stay out to the right. So he would have stayed out of Nikki's sightlines, obviously waiting till she got to that point further along in the alley, towards the end of this alley, where he launched a vicious attack, stabbing her numerous times. The killer launched his vicious attack. There were two witnesses nearby. One of them tried to intervene and actually knocked the knife out of his hands. However, the killer picked it back up and went running off the way that he came, as indicated by this red line on this overhead shot. Now, he ran back the way that he came. He was caught by a little bit of the video, and he disappeared as he made it out to Bleecker Street. We're not sure where he went at that point. Look closely at this killer. Let's look at the description that the police have given out, and then we're going to examine some close-up video to see if we can find out even more. First off, the suspect's description is 5 foot 10 inches to 6 foot 2 inches, 150 to 200 pounds with a medium build. Now he's wearing a dark 3/4 length cloth jacket, possibly a pea coat with a high collar. He has a white scarf around his neck, and it apparently seems to have some yellow on it. Dark pants and dark shoes, and some sort of hat. Now he walks with a limp. His left shoulder drops, and his right foot turns out more than his left foot does. We also know that he's right-handed. He wears a watch on his left wrist, and his skin color is not definitive. The police have said white, but he could also possibly be mulatto or light brown. Some closer shots of this suspect, where I've played a little bit with the brightness, the contrast, and the color to see if we can bring out some more details. You'll see as we look at him that the scarf that he's wearing appears to have some yellow on it. You can see the collar of his jacket is up so it almost comes up to his nose. Now he's wearing some sort of hat with apparently blonde hair coming out of it. It's not outside the realm of possibility that this is a wig or one of those hats you can get with a bit of blonde hair that sticks out of the side. We don't know. Now, as we start looking closer at his face and changing the brightness and the contrast, you can see the skin color is not definitive. When we get in really close, I'll try and sharpen it up a bit, and you can start to see some of the facial features that may be there. Now, I don't know that this is necessarily accurate, but if it helps you identify this person, you have any ideas, please don't hesitate to call the Toronto Police. Now, this case, this senseless slaughter of Nikki Semret, has really touched this city. The community has come out in droves. They've set up a makeshift memorial at the site where the murder took place. People have left cards and flowers and tears at the spot where she was killed. Now, if you know anything about this case, or you think after watching this video you might recognize a suspect or have some suspicions about someone, if you're in the Etrian community and you're afraid to talk, call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. You don't have to identify yourself and they won't know who you are, but leave them the tip. Or call Detective Sergeant Gary Giroux at the Toronto Police Homicide Squad. He can be reached at 416-808-7400. To follow this case closely for any new developments, go to my Facebook page at Ross McLean Security, or to see the other police videos on this case, go to my webpage at rossmcleansecurity.com. Let's catch this vicious killer.